Breaking news. A federal appeals court on Friday threw out the murder conviction of an ex-Blackwater security guard and ordered 3 of his former colleagues to be resentenced in the high-profile prosecution stemming from the massacre of 14 unarmed Iraqi civilians at the Baghdad traffic circle in 2007. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit ordered a new trial after tossing out the murder conviction of former security contractor Nicholas Slatten. The 3-judge panel said Slatten should have had a separate trial instead of being tried alongside his former colleagues. At a new trial, Slatten would be able to introduce evidence that one of his co-defendants had fired the first shot. Separately, the court said Paul Slough, Dustin Hurd, and Evan Liberty, who were all convicted of manslaughter and other offenses over their respective roles in the incident, should be resentenced because their 30-year prison terms were too long. The court also threw out one of Liberty's convictions for attempted manslaughter. The Justice Department declined to comment to Reuters. Lawyers for the defendants could also not be reached. The September 16, 2007 incident stood out for its brutality, even in a city in the grip of a bitter sectarian war, and sparked debate over the role of private security contractors working for the U.S. government in war zones. A heavily armed 4-truck Blackwater worldwide convoy the men were traveling in had been trying to clear a path for U.S. diplomats after a nearby car bomb. At Nissour Square, the 4 guards opened fire on the Iraqis, including women and children with machine guns and grenade launchers. In addition to the 14 dead, another 17 Iraqis were wounded. This is our interview with investigative journalist Reese Erlich after the murder conviction was handed down in 2015.
Well, this is the most significant, most serious of a series of atrocities carried out by both the U.S. military and military contractors in Iraq. And frankly, under the Bush administration, there was no intention to actually prosecute these guys. One of the charges expired. They allowed the statute of limitations to run. The Obama administration Justice Department had to refile a murder charge as a result. It was botched, and I think intentionally so, under the Bush administration, because they didn't want the details coming out of what the U.S. had done. And this is really the first time that there's been a conviction and heavy sentencing for this kind of activity. Dispute as to whether they can be tried in American courts. Of course, they can't be tried in Iraqi court, which means effectively there's nothing, they can do anything they want, carry out murder, mayhem, and never be held responsible for it. You know, a question that I always wondered about, and I've often been asked, is why would the administration want to hire contractors when they cost so much more money and are so much more trouble to deal with than the U.S. military? I mean, they pay 3, 4, 5 times the salaries to these contractors that they do to the ordinary troops. Well, one of the reasons is because they're not responsible to anybody. If they carry out U.S. policy by massacring people, the argument then comes up, well, they're not doing it on U.S. soil, so they can't be prosecuted here. Whereas the U.S. military who engage in similar activities, at least in theory, they could be held responsible to a military court. So I think what we're seeing here is a conscious effort by certainly the last administration and to some extent the current administration to make sure that these kinds of activities can be carried out without people being held responsible.
And what does this also tell us about, these convictions are really the guards that were responsible, but the Blackwater leadership and head of the corporation is really getting off scot-free here.
Yeah, not only the head of Eric Prince, the head of Blackwater, but the U.S. Military officials who, with a wink and a nod, condone such activities. It's not unique. Remember Abu Ghraib, the infamous torture photos that came out some years back? Seymour Hersh and CBS and others revealed them. Well, the only people who were ever held responsible for that were extremely low-level guards in the prison. The people, including the CIA, who designed the torture programs, the cabinet members in the Bush administration who approved the torture methods, were never held responsible, let alone put on trial.